Myself and other content creators are guilty of hyping of Lies and Rain, but it was for good reason. The demo looked incredible for a relatively unknown indie studio called Costello, who made a game called Arcade a few years back. It's a wireframe retro shoot 'em up, and I remember actually enjoying it. But of Lies and Rain appears to be this studio's stab at giving their all, and in some ways I do believe they have delivered. Everything has pretty good physics. You can do this. You also have Batman's sausagey fingers, which are always fun to play with, and of Lies and Rain also has no shame in letting you know it's heavily inspired by Half-Life Alyx, and has borrowed many things that feel familiar. And it's no bad thing. From the way you grab ammo over your shoulder and reload the guns, to breaking small wooden crates for ammo and health, and it even has gravity gloves called gravity gloves, and it even features some sounds that do sound exactly like Half-Life Alyx. They've even added content creator tools to make sure the game looks great on YouTube, plus it's being ported to 3 platforms almost at once, with the PSVR2 version coming slightly later. But thanks to the excellent PSVR2 demo we have available right now, we already know that version will look awesome. But now it's actually time to talk about if Of Lies and Rain is actually a good game in its entirety for today's video. And I'll be reviewing both the PCVR and MetaQuest versions. And if you enjoyed today's video, please leave a like and subscribe for more VR content. Of Lies and Rain starts with humanity hanging on by a thread for survival in the year 2048, after a 20-year war with a rogue AI called ADE. The atmosphere is filled with mercury, which rains down, forcing all human survivors underground, and your mission is to stop ADE and save what's left of humanity while trying to get your memory back along the way. The game is set in 2 realms, the real world and a digital one. The real world is pretty bleak and miserable, with mercury constantly raining down and varying AI robots have taken over the world. It's a warped, hostile environment filled with things that basically want to kill you all the time. The digital world is actually a pretty cool Tron-like realm, and more about collecting GPUs, which I'll talk about in a minute, and some very intense platforming. Completing these sections sometimes unlocks something in the real world or transports you to another location that is important to the story. The gameplay is made up of survival, shooting, some physics-based puzzle solving, and collecting the earlier mentioned GPUs to upgrade your own survival skills and your weapons. These upgrades range from increasing your health, gas mask time, which you'll need for the real world sections, as there's some sort of toxic spore clouds dotted around, and you'll also be able to double the health you receive from health pens. The real world weapon upgrades are pretty cool too, and there's also upgrades for the digital world weapons, because the digital realm difficulty ramps up as the game progresses. For one of the digital guns, there's one upgrade that lets you destroy blocks of data. You can also increase the amount of mid-air jumps you can do, and these upgrades definitely come in handy because the digital levels become much more hostile, and you'll even be chased by some large worm space thing that destroys the blocks you need to get around. The gameplay recipe I think is pretty good, and the story of Lies and Rain is actually very compelling, and it also has good voice acting. Graphics wise on PC, this looks on par with any other top indie VR game, and there's times it looks really good, but there's also times it can look pretty basic, with flat floor textures and doors that just don't seem the right size, and the physics can be buggy, but overall it is an impressive package. There's a few graphical mishaps, like some parts of walls missing and some odd bits that clearly need addressing, but it definitely still needs a little bit of optimization work. The Quest version, however, was actually pretty shocking, and in a good way. They've done an incredible job for this port, and even though some of the colours and details, like textures for example, take a minute to load in, I was very impressed. There's even graphic options for you to play with, where you can change the frame rate from 72Hz all the way to 120Hz, and you can enable and disable asynchronous space warp. Now normally, asynchronous space warp can make Quest games look horrific, but on Quest 3 it was very well implemented, and I found 90Hz with asynchronous space warp turned on to be the best for visuals and performance. On PC, loading is quick and smooth, but on the Quest it's a little bit slower, and mid-game loading causes things to stutter and even disappear. But as I said, overall I was pretty blown away by how close it looked to the excellent PC version. Going by the PSVR2 demo though, I think the PSVR2 version is going to be the best of the bunch in terms of graphics and stable performance. Now let's get into some negatives, and there's quite a few to go through, and some of them I was very surprised about, especially when the developers mentioned this game has been play tested for over a year, but I'm going to assume this was done internally by what I'm about to say. Now, for some people, having a full body in VR is important, and personally I love full body IK, especially when it's done right. But I also know it's a very hard thing to do, which is why we get so many games offering us only hands to interact with everything. So to counter this, sound normally plays a huge part in making you believe you're actually physically present in the game's world, and knowing all of this has raised a couple of glaring issues for me. Firstly, your character has no footstep sounds at all, and maybe some of you would think this is trivial, but once you notice your movement makes zero sound, you start to feel like a floating camera with hands. And throughout my playtime, once I noticed it, it was very hard to get out of my head until something happens that pulls you back into the game, like some action. This issue really hits home when you go upstairs or walk in water. Movement is surprisingly restrictive too. Most of the game you can't step off anything, even a small step, without some invisible barrier preventing you. And you can't fall off some ledges, even though it looks completely safe to do so. You also can't jump, so instead all traversal is done by grabbing the environment. The developers have actually gamified this in some sections though, and I thought that was a nice touch. You also can't run, making some of the sections of the game feel insanely boring. And it's in those long walking moments where there's nothing to shoot or look at, you simply feel like you are a floating camera with hands. And it's a real shame because this does cause a bit of a disconnect for me, and at certain times in the game it did affect my enjoyment. The main gun in the game is a pistol, and it has no bullet tracer effects. And I know some of you again might think this is not necessary, but bullet tracer effects are the only way players can accurately shoot in games without the need for crosshairs. And unless you're using an assault rifle or a sniper rifle, players will rarely use crosshairs. When you eventually upgrade the pistol though later on in the game, you unlock a bullet tracer effect. But at first, without it, shooting can be unnecessarily frustrating. The enemy AI isn't special either. The spiders, for example, literally stand still, giving you plenty of time to shoot them. Others run around mindlessly, and if a loading screen happens during a fight, I've had some of the enemies vanish. I'm not saying Half-Life Alyx isn't a challenge, because it definitely is, especially the digital levels. I died many times playing this, but I just want to keep your expectations in check that the combat is good but nothing special. The gameplay length though is 8 to 9 hours, which is definitely welcome, and overall it's been up and down in terms of immersion, quality and satisfaction. And while mentioning satisfaction, I definitely enjoyed the boss fight sections. So now on to my summary. There's times I really like Half-Life Alyx, and it often surprised me how good this is for an indie studio game. The digital levels, which start as a mere distraction, actually become some of my favourite parts of the game due to how intense they slowly become, especially when you get the minigun and the ability to shoot blocks to create your own path. These levels could have been a game all on their own, but due to how basic they look, players may have skipped a game like this, so including them in this game while adding a reason to play them is a really good thing. Sometimes though you do go through hell to get through these levels for what feels like very little reward, but I personally enjoyed the challenge. There's a lot to like here, but throughout the campaign there was also times it felt underwhelming, and the issues I've mentioned can make it feel pretty average overall. However, I was compelled to complete the story, and that in itself should let you know that I do feel it is worthy of the purchase. Now interestingly, the developers wouldn't tell me the price, saying they wanted to announce it at launch, leaving me with the task of making a suggested price for this review. My gut is telling me that $20, maybe $25, is the right price for Half-Life Alyx as it is today, considering it is in early access. You're buying into an unfinished product that does have a lot going for it. It has some flaws, but it also has a compelling story. I wouldn't consider it an essential VR game at this time, but if you're looking for a game with a challenge and a good story and some lengthy gameplay, I think this is one you should consider. It's a good effort, and the devs should be praised for what they have achieved, especially aiming for all the platforms at once, but it definitely needed a bit more time, a bit more quality control, and definitely more playtesting to be something I would consider special. And if you're thinking of picking this up on Quest, I'll be pinning a 10% off Quest affiliate code down in the comments. Well, that's all I've got for you today. Thank you to anyone who likes and subscribes, and I'll see you all on the next one.